For those that don't know, Link Click is a donghua. It's basically about these two guys, Lu Guang and Chang Jiashi, that work together going back into photographs, and they take jobs for people that might want some info from the past. We are going to be making Time Photo Studio, which is their photography store that they basically do almost everything out of. It has such a cool design. I have a feeling it's not gonna seem like it from this video. So I will say right off the bat that this show deals with some really heavy topics and is definitely not for kids. I would say it has a similar feeling to something like Terror in Resonance or Psychopaths. There's a lot of mystery and crime elements. So if you're interested, maybe give it a watch. It is amazing. But if you're here for something a little lighter, let's hang out and build a photo studio. I did do a whole painting of the exterior of this building, but this ended up being quite a long build. So that's going to be a bonus video over on Patreon if you're interested in that. It was a lot of fun. So let's dive. Pretty much every build begins a little something like this. This is often maybe the most time-consuming part of the project, where I take a really good look at references that I've collected and start drawing out and cutting the base shapes that everything will be built from. This time I'm building most of this project out of paperboard and cardstock. My favorite crafting supply is pizza boxes, and that's not just because I get to eat pizza. This is also always one of the trickiest parts because I have to decide scale and try to get proportions right, which I really just do by eyeballing what I think looks right. So if you ever notice the proportions are a little bit off, no, you didn't. Then I can start gluing some of these pieces together and creating the beginning shapes of the building. This one was somewhat simple, but has a deceptively complicated front step area since it's kind of a fun inset diagonal shape. Comparatively to the rest of the building, it had some more small specific shapes that needed to be cut. Before attaching pieces together, I always make sure to cut the windows out because of course it's much easier now than struggling with a three-dimensional shape later. Once they're cut, I can start gluing the sides and back onto the front so that the building can start taking shape. After that, I needed to lay in the floor, which comes out from the back a little bit so that we can build the solarium off of it later. The floor inside is made from tile, so I just painted the main color first and then went in with a pencil to draw on the grout lines. Finally, I'm going over that with a gloss varnish to give it that really nice shiny floor quality. I wanted to keep this pretty simple because, surprise, most of this will not be seen at the end. I did consciously try to simplify things and not spend too much effort on the pieces on the interior. I feel like people are gonna be laughing at me saying that in a few minutes. I'm also starting to fill some seams with spackle this time. Can I just say spackle is my arch nemesis? I know it's ridiculous to say this considering that I don't think the intended use for spackle is filling seams on a miniature pizza box building, but joint compound, you are the one. These aren't gonna get put in until later, but we're gonna start making the front teal windows from paperboard. I'm cutting the windowed area out and then starting to add details to make them more 3D with other sections of paperboard. I'm painting that frame teal first and then adding the plastic packaging for windows on the back. On top of that, I'm adding some pre-painted strips of paperboard to divide the windows as well on the top and bottom. Then I need to build the little section inside where the darkroom is. There are quite a lot of things that we need to start decorating the interior, but the biggest thing is lots and lots of photos on the walls. So I cut a bunch of little rectangles of cardstock and I'm painting them with different designs and then painting frames along the edges. I also needed to make a clock to go above the door, so I'm punching out a circle from cardstock and creating a clock face on that. Then we need to make the door to the darkroom. And to be honest, this is a little different in a few different shots. So I just went with a door design that I had a good reference for from the back solarium. Then we can start attaching all these pieces before we slide the darkroom into place in the project. Once that's in, we can start working on the many props for the back solarium. These are arguably the most important because you'll see the most of these from the outside since there's so many windows in that area. I'm starting by painting the rug on a piece of cardstock. It has quite a modern geometric pattern. Then we need to start building some of the furniture. I'm making this chair first because it seemed like it would be a somewhat simple one to start with. I'm just cutting the shape from cardstock. This strangely reminded me of a gyroid from Animal Crossing for some reason. Does it have sentience? Perhaps. Basically, I just had to paint this and then fold everything into the shape. Then we're moving on to the other chair. I'm making the base with a rectangle of cardstock painted green and making the arms with painted strips of cardstock and gluing them on the sides. Probably the most important piece of furniture is the couch. This is where a lot of the dives happen. Lu Guang certainly spends quite a lot of time here hanging out. I'm making this from our ever trusty craft foam. So I'm gluing 2 layers together to make the front and back pieces since they're thicker, and then the arms are just 1 layer. I put some little tiny foam core pieces on for the feet, and then the main reason I used craft foam is so that I can create the tufting on the back of the couch by pressing indentations in with a pencil. Finally, I'm painting all of that an orangey brown. And then we need to build the coffee table, which again, I'm making in a very similar manner to all the other pieces. And of course, I needed to add a photo for them to dive into on the table. Then we'll start on some of the potted plants. The pots are going to be made from the back clips of the carrot charms that I took off the light strand that I used in the Kiki's Delivery Service project. I'm painting those various colors. After that dried, I'm filling the inside with a little bit of cotton ball and then sprinkling some delicious dirt on top. I'm adding pieces of twig to be the trunks on the plants.
I'm not gonna lie to you right now, it kind of just looks like a plunger. From plunger to beautiful tree. These are the journeys we take on this channel.
Then of course, we need to get our delicious leafy greens in for the day. So we're pulling out the clump foliage. To make this other more palm-like tree, I'm going to be cutting some starburst kind of pattern pieces from some green paper. I'm just curling the leaves in and poking a hole in the center so I can thread it onto the trunk. Do you ever think of a song that you used to listen to like 10 years ago and you just suddenly can't get it out of your head?
Get out, that's what she said. You drive me crazy. I can't believe that's what you did. Just tell me, baby. Oh, I'm the perfect mistake. I'm hoping you may cry now.
I cut and painted the 2 side walls of the solarium and then added the door onto the right green wall. In my version, in the end, this door goes nowhere. Any day is a good day to channel the Winchester Mystery House. And then we need to make one more little plant to go on a table in the corner. I'm using these Army Painter woodland tufts for the first time that I got from the Real Terrain Hobbies Builders Kit. Honestly, using this kind of felt like a cheat code. There was literally 0 skill or effort required from me to make this look good. If there is no struggle, am I even crafting? In the outer hallway, there is a staircase, so I'm making that from a bunch of various strips of cardstock that I painted black and just gluing the steps up the 2 side strips. Ah, there's the struggle. And we're just sticking that in the hallway. The solarium has quite a lot of curtains all around, and we're starting by making the ones that kind of divide that space from the rest of the shop. I'm painting some tissue paper brown and then folding it up accordion style to look like a curtain. Those pieces get stuck on either side of the entryway, and then I could finally start assembling the solarium. The back wall is brick on the bottom. To get that texture, I am using craft foam and drawing on indentations for the brick wall. On that, I'm painting with the grout color first, and then very carefully trying to start painting in the bricks, which went surprisingly well and was not too difficult, thankfully. I laid that in behind the couch and added a strip on top as the sill that the greenhouse windows will sit on top of. Since it's gonna be a lot harder to see later, let me at least show you all the details inside now. I know what's in there, now you know what's in there. it's worth all the work. To make the windows of the solarium, I am cutting frames from paperboard and painting those white and then attaching those onto some plastic packaging for the windows. On the top windowed roof, there is a pendant light, which is not going to actually light up in my piece, unfortunately. To make this, I am painting a round bead gray, threading it onto a head pin, and then adding a little section of tape at the top to keep it on. This whole piece is going to attach onto the top window roof, and then I'll continue assembling the rest of the solarium. There are sections of curtains draped from the top of the solarium to the bottom, so I'm going to add those. These have 2 layers on each side, 1 brown curtain and 1 white curtain. I'm also adding these 2 thin wires across the top, and once those interior details were finished, I can add the back window section. Before adding the top window, I'm going to make sure I finish all the interior details, so I'm going to head to work on the front space now. I'm making several little pieces to fill the space, since you'll be able to see in the wall of windows a little bit, though truthfully, not much. So I'm adding the front counter and also several little pieces of furniture that I made quickly. Of course, putting photos on the walls as well. Then I'm adding in the section of wall that the front photo window display will go on, and also adding the support beam in the middle hallway. Then I need to start building out the little waiting area on the right side with various photos on the wall, a couch, and a plant. Once all of that was in there, the interior was done, so I can start building the front photo display. Most of this is just adding lots of photos. What a surprise. And once all that was done, I could start putting in the front windows to finish off the storefront area. The final piece I needed to make for this area was the door, which was quite similar to the windows, but I cut the door from the frame, painted it green, and then painted the frame onto the window in the door. Of course, I have to add a little handle and attach it with some cardstock hinges so it can at least kind of open and I can position it in the way that I want. After that was in, I started doing some general paint all over the exterior of the building, beginning with the concrete step base, and then I started painting the main walls a very light yellow off-white. Then we're finally onto the exterior details of the building. Believe it or not, I am not going to be making the second floor interior. We're really demonstrating some restraint this time around. That means we need to cloud these windows up so that we're not looking at delicious melted cheese through the window. I do this by sponging on some school glue to one side of plastic packaging, and basically this just gives us a really nice diffusion material for the light to come through, while the outer facing side is still shiny like a window. And then we need to start creating the window frames. So I cut the basic shape from paperboard and then started the tedious process of laying in every little section of panes. They're called window panes for a reason, my friends. All of these are pre-painted with green. There are quite a few windows that are just a little bit different in pane pattern. I absolutely love the patterns on these panes. Extremely time consuming, but they are very beautiful and geometric. Finally, those all get laid onto the outside of the building.
I know this is most likely going to be about 20 seconds of the video, but I want you to know I've been here all day, folks.
To create the different trims that kind of divide sections of the building, I'm painting some various width strips of paperboard with a terracotta kind of color. Then I'm just wrapping those around the building. The middle one has a double layer, so I am doing one strip and then laying another thinner one on top of that. And then on the bottom one, I'm creating essentially a little shelf for the shop sign to go on later. I'm adding tiny little supports underneath that, and then we'll start creating some of these awnings and platforms coming out from the building. I'm starting by painting a piece of paperboard gray and laying that over the main entrance. I'm doing the same thing by making the bottom of the fence section on the front windows as well. I'm also cutting a top railing for those from paperboard and then cutting a bunch of super thin strips that I'll be laying on for the fence rungs. I'm attaching those on one by one, and then that top railing gets laid on top of that. And then guess what? We gotta do it again on the other side.
不行了。
On the inside of those, I'm laying a strip of cardstock horizontally in the middle, dividing it into two, and then we can move on to some of the other outer details. I'm adding a strip along the base to continue the concrete foundation along the sides. There are sections of the building that pieces have kind of come off and revealed the brick underneath, so I'm creating that effect by carefully cutting and peeling off the top layer of paperboard and then painting on a brick texture underneath. This was so unbelievably satisfying for some reason. Not gonna lie, I kind of wanted to go wild and just do tons of these all over the building.
现在不是胡思乱想的时候。
Gotta stay strong and keep to the reference. Then I'm adding the next layer onto the awnings, which is a really light brown painted piece of cardstock that I've slightly folded into a wonky zigzag pattern. On top of that, I am laying on slightly lighter colored strips to give the roof some ridges, and I'm doing the same thing above all of the windows as well. Then I can finally work on the sign, which was a piece I was really looking forward to. So I cut a slightly decorative frame from paperboard, painted that brown, and then glued that on top of a white piece of paperboard. Then I have to paint the name of the shop on. I have not actually studied Hanzi, so please excuse my characters here. I'm just doing my best. Then we just have to stick the sign in its place. On the sides of the building, there are sections that come out, probably where the door leads to on the left, but I'm going for the aesthetic, not the logic here. These kind of remind me of little sheds almost. So they are really just a rectangle piece and then two long strips with an angled top for the roof line. To be able to glue these into place and have it be flush against the building, I'm going to be cutting the bottom concrete foundation strips in the areas that these will sit. And then I can start putting on the roofs, which I'm going to do in the exact same way as all the other roofs. On the side, I'm going to add a vent so it's not just a blank box. And the final piece I'm laying onto these is a little strip of cardstock down the side to cover that seam, and then we can finally start making the roof. I'm cutting two rectangles from cardboard so I get a little bit of width. These have just a little bit of overhang. The roof has a dormer window on the front. I need to cut a hole so that the light will be able to shine through to that window. I'm cutting the window from the front section of that dormer area first. This one has a particularly cool shape because it's flat at the top with some nice tiered details. I'm making those by laying some craft foam on the side so that I could get some of the width variation. Then of course we need to go in with our spackle, fill all those gaps so that we can paint. I made the window in the same manner as the others, painting the frame a subtle red this time and laying the panes in their pattern. And I'm going to do the texture and shadowing for this before I lay it onto the roof. So I'm going in with a makeup brush and dry brushing on some darker and lighter colors to enhance the forms and also give it more of a concrete texture. Once that was all done, I need to finish off the main part of the roof, which means we're pulling out the corrugated packaging. I'm kind of rationing this. Yes, I know I could buy some corrugated paper or something, but isn't it just 10 times more satisfying using recycled materials? You can get corrugated material by pulling off the top layer from cardboard, but the scale is often much bigger than this one that I'm using. I'm cutting two pieces of this to size for each piece of the roof, laying those pieces on top of the cardboard, and then where the two pieces meet, I'm going to be finishing off the peak of the roof with some folded cardstock rectangles. I'm just laying these along the top, overlapping with each other a little bit. Now we just need to paint. So I went in with a light orangey brown color as a base, and then we're back with our trusty makeup brush to start bringing out some of the dimensionality of the corrugation. I'm just going lightly over top with a lighter orange color. I do also need to quickly finish off the edges of the roof, covering the remaining exposed edges with cardstock and painting that to match as well. This is also when I snuck in to attach the roof onto the solarium. I'll be adding a few more details onto the building later, but now is a great time to make the base. There was some scraps of XPS foam left over from some house projects, so like with most random trash, they always make their way into my hands. I've never used XPS foam before, but I thought it would work really well for what I wanted to do with this. I'm marking where I need to cut by pressing an indentation in with a ruler. I do not have a foam cutter, so I'm cutting this with a hobby saw.
The greatest sound I've ever heard.
Feel free to clip that soundbite and use it for a horror film, whatever. Once I had my 2 halves cut, I am just gluing them together along the middle, and then once that had dried, I'm going to cut it down to size to be thinner like the alleyways around the building. Then I'm starting to mark and draw in the details of the sidewalk and street elements that I'm going to include. To really create those indentations, I'm going in with a yarn needle and adding as much dimension into the foam as I can. This is really the main reason that I decided to use XPS foam. In the back behind the solarium, there is a small brick path, so I'm drawing those lines on first with a ruler, and then I can really start creating all those rows of bricks. To finish off the sides, I'm cutting some strips of cardstock that I'll carry the designs down onto as well. And then I can start painting everything.
And there's nothing I can do, and there's nothing I can say. No, there's no running away from the darkness and the pain.
I'm going to be painting the back bricks in the same way that I did earlier, laying down that grout color first and then painting the bricks on top. Where all of the indentations are, I'm going in with a dark blue to really try and match the animation style of the show. It was looking a little bit Bob the Builder at this point. So we have to go over top with an orangey brown acrylic wash to tone down the colors just a little bit and hopefully make it a little more cohesive. Then over top, I'm going in to create some bright highlights and try to add some illusion of depth. There is a really subtle checkered pattern on some of these sections that remind me a little bit of a Sonic level. So I'm going in and painting those on. I'm gonna start adding some subtle weathering all over the parts of the building to make it look more dynamic. Using the weathering pastels from the Real Terrain Hobbies Builders Kit, I'm just grinding off a little bit into a pan, and then I'm going to go in with a brush to smudge this onto areas that I want to be darker, mainly where different pieces meet. So I started creating some additional depth with the rusty color on the roofs. Then I could finally attach on the dormer window. We're gonna take a quick detour to do something that I was putting off and make the brick texture on the outside walls of the solarium.
My old friend, it's been a while.
I'm gonna be creating this with a paper mache mixture of flour and water, heavier on the flour and keeping it relatively thick so that I'll be able to draw a texture into it. I know some of you are probably looking at me like, why? I always ask myself the same question. So I'm laying that directly onto the side. Think a little bit more like an impasto painting. Then I'm using a strip of paperboard to create rows and start the brick texture. I'm going to then go in and start drawing on the vertical sections to create some individual bricks. And once that's left to dry, we're left with something like this. I'm painting over it with a super light gray, and then to bring out that lovely texture we just created, the makeup brush returns with a vengeance, and I'm brushing some white on top. Now we're gonna start finishing up some various details like adding the pipe on the front of the building. So I'm cutting a space for it in the side of the front awning. The pipe itself is made from a twist tie. I'm painting that silver and laying it into place on the front. I also needed to add the supports under the left window balcony and the gutter layer under the front and back of the roof. I'm painting on some of the detail of the front window pieces. We're also going to go in with the black chalk pastel to weather some of the more gray areas. I'm adding some depth to the concrete base and the front steps and bringing out some of those little details more with that. As I said, mostly I'm going into the areas where two different pieces meet and darkening those intersections with shadow. I'm also doing this same thing on the base all around where the building will lay on it, partly to let me know where to put it, but also to really make everything a little more cohesive together. I am building this project for our most recent Patreon project challenge theme, which was overgrown. We had some absolutely incredible projects from everyone this time around. I love seeing everybody's work so much. I think one of my favorite things about making videos on YouTube is being able to see all of the stuff that everyone makes. So if you have something you want to send to me, I always love to see them. The final piece and one of the biggest reasons I wanted to build this is all of the overgrown vines and ivy that is climbing its way up the building. To prepare for that, I am painting on some subtle moss areas first with a really dry textured brush. This helps me map out a little where the moss is gonna go. I have 3 different kinds of foliage that I will be using on this. Some vine-like floral moss from the dollar store, the clump foliage, and what I'll be using the most is this Army Painter Battlefield grass from Neil's kit.
For some reason, I was expecting this to smell like oregano or something. It does not. Kind of smells like glue.
We'll put a piece of paper down to catch the excess, and then I'll start using glue to paint on the areas that I want the moss to be and just sprinkle it on like glitter. So let's do this.
This is already so exciting.
On the solarium in the back, I'm going to start painting on some ivy in the shape I want it, and then I'll layer various types of moss over top to give that some dimension. So, time photo studio. Let's dive. I cannot overstate how much fun this project was to build. I know it won't seem like it to all of you because I have to work on the edit and filming, but this project actually came together quite quickly. I'm really happy with the final product. I've been really wanting to build something like this for a while. So when I watched the show and this came up, I couldn't stop myself from building it. Feel free to leave me any anime or show recommendations that you've been watching and enjoying recently. And most importantly, thank you so much to everyone supporting the channel over on Patreon and Ko-fi. You all truly are the only reason that I can really continue doing this work, and I am so grateful.